Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and boy, the content doesn't seem to stop at this time of year as Wargaming just released the 1.23.1 test server, which has a whole new branch of Japanese heavy tanks for it. And it has the new double aiming mechanic that you'll be used to on the Type 63 premium tank, which has been a loot box exclusive. So you don't have to wait for much longer. Probably in January we'll be seeing this content. And in today's video, I'm going to let you know all about the new Japanese heavy tanks so you can get an idea of whether this tech tree is something to get excited about and whether the new tier 10 Type 71 is going to be the new best tier 10 in the game. So firstly, if you want to be prepared for the new Japanese heavy tanks, you will have to save yourself up 17,800 experience in your Chi-Hi if you want to be getting the Mitsu 108 on day one. So the Mitsu 108, let's take a look at it. First impressions when the vehicle comes, completely stock. Okay man, this looks a lot like a T-28. It's like a Japanese T-28 at tier 5. Multiple turrets as you expect from Japanese vehicles, and it is long, but it's not all that tall. Let's talk a little bit about it. So the Mitsu 108 heavy tank was a project that was developed in accordance with the 1930s concept, which dictated that a heavy breakout tank was to be built with light anti-projectile armor and several turrets. Due to the large dimensions of the vehicle, its suspension elements were partially covered by screens. And by 1942, the program reached its final stage, but by this time the tank was considered obsolete and was not in demand. So how bad is the Mitsu 108 going to be when it's stock? Oof, that really doesn't look like a very fun gun for tier 5. What about the turret armor on this tank? Ugh, that's not good turret armor either. Luckily, you'll be able to use the radio from all of your other Japanese vehicles, but I'd also like to recommend to you all that you might not even want to upgrade the radio on this vehicle, as it increases your weight by 110 kilograms. And in fact, the second radio on this vehicle weighs only 50 kilograms, so that might be the sweet spot on this tank. So literally shave yourself 190 kilograms off the vehicle, use the second radio, and you're going to have a better power to weight ratio. Let's see if you can manage to sneak the turret on this tank. Can you sneak the gun on this vehicle as well without getting tracks? Yes, you can, so that would be my recommended upgrade order. Next, the engine on this vehicle, probably want to get it even though it's 5,400 experience unless you're racing up the tech tree. So my upgrade order would be to get the turret, the gun, the engine, and then get the tracks on this vehicle, unless you want to go straight for the GNU. So let's take a look at it when it's fully upgraded. So it gets like a whole bar on the top of the tank, and all in all, statistically, this thing doesn't look bad, but it doesn't look good. Awful damage per minute, but 300 alpha is pretty good. The penetration is decent on this vehicle for a tier 5. Accuracy is horrible, gun handling is horrible, awesome 10 degrees of gun depression. The vehicle's pretty slow, and it isn't as heavy as you would expect for a Japanese tank, just weighing 46 tons. It's got enough view range to be able to spot for itself. Let's take a look at the vehicle's armor. Oh gosh, well, yeah. This is going to be an XP pinata. Oh man, all of the derp guns out there, you could use your 105mm heat rounds and you're going to be able to absolutely decimate this vehicle. Okay, well, nothing really too much to look forward to with the Japanese tech tree. So maybe things will be better once you reach tier 6 and you're going to need to spend 27,500 experience to get the GNU. So the GNU, what does this vehicle look like when it is completely stock? Well, the GNU, wow, it looks a lot like a Cheeto mixed with a tiger. So let's find out a little bit about this vehicle. So in 1942, Japan began to cooperate more closely with Germany in tank construction. Emphasis was placed on the hull, welding technology, optics and other aspects in which Japanese technology lagged behind. In the same year, the project of the Type 3 heavy breakout tank appeared. The vehicle resembled a larger medium tank with improved armor and armament. Auxiliary machine gun turrets were abandoned, and the project was designed with cast turrets and Hara-style suspension, but with staggered support rollers and a liquid-cooled aircraft engine. Development stopped at the design stage. So how bad is the GNU when this thing is stock? That is not going to be a very fun gun to play with on a tier 6 heavy tank. But how good is the gun going to be once you've got it upgraded? Okay, that's playable. Kind of looks a lot like the gun that you'd have on a Tiger 131, for example, but with slightly more alpha damage. So this thing's looking like it could be pretty cool. So once again, you do have a variety of radios on this vehicle. I would recommend the second one, which is going to be the lightest radio on this vehicle, and it will save yourself some weight, so don't bother getting that top radio. So let's see if we can put the turret on this vehicle and we can put the gun on this vehicle without having to upgrade the tracks. Yes, we can. That would be my recommended upgrade path. Next, let's take a look at the engine on this vehicle. Whoa, the engine weighs 1.5 tons more. But you can still manage to put it on before you get the tracks, so would probably still go that way. So that would be my recommended upgrade path for the Juno. Or should I say the Juno? So once you've got this thing upgraded, the turret looks like it's fairly formidable with the angling. It definitely looks like it's going to be a bit more of a hard tank to deal with. And interestingly enough, unlike the Tiger, which its front very much resembles, it's angled. So if this thing has gun depression, which it does, I can see it has 10 degrees of gun depression, that means that this thing is going to be pretty darn good. Good DPM, good alpha, half okay pen, not the best gun handling, 10 degrees of gun depression. It's got a really good power to weight ratio as well. It weighs 50 tons, so this thing will be good for ramming certain vehicles, but not too many of them. This thing just looks like an all-round beast performing heavy tank. It's not going to be great in any areas, but it's not going to be bad in any areas. Let's take a look to see how this thing's armor works. Okay, so when it's not angling at all, it has a horrible weak point, but its armor just seems to be great outside of the lower plate. Unfortunately, if you do decide to try and side scrape with this vehicle, the whole plate on the side is going to become a massive weak point, and it does look like this is going to get overmatched by all 46mm caliber guns, so watch out for that. But man, if this thing is using its 10 degrees of gun depression and it's not getting shot up into those flaps, this thing is a pretty darn good vehicle against equal and lower tier tanks until they load gold, and then it becomes a big XP pinata. But the Juno, this thing is actually looking decent inside World of Tanks, and it's a perfectly playable vehicle, both stock and when it's fully upgraded. All right, so now let's take a look at the Tier 7. You have to spend 51,000 experience to get the Juto. So the Juto, let's find out a little bit about this vehicle. Firstly, I want to take a look at it in the garage before we read all the blurb. All right, so wow, freaky looking turret on this thing. Wow, this thing doesn't really look like anything that's currently in the game. It looks like its own kind of Japanese novel tank design. So let's find out a little bit about the Type 4 Juto. So a Japanese heavy tank project was created on the basis of German tank building experience using German technical documentation. A rapid increase in demands for armoring and armament led to the project being closed at the design stage. Well, even though it says it's German, not many German tanks have these angled slants down the side. And such a well-angled upper hull, almost like a Panther within that regard. But just a huge freaky turret, at least when it's stock. So how bad is this thing going to be when it's stock? Again, that is a horrible gun. It's always weird to me when you have a perfectly decent gun on a tier 6, and then when you jump up to tier 7, Wargaming just makes it much worse than it previously was. So I guess once again, you're going to want to use not the middle radio actually anymore on this vehicle. Looks like the stock radio is better. So let's take a look to see whether the upgraded radio is worth it. Oh my word, that radio weighs half a ton. Would probably recommend just using the stock radio on this vehicle then. And upgrade path wise, can we manage to put the turret without the tracks? Yes, we can. Can we manage to put the gun without the tracks? Yes, we can. So that is the upgrade path that I would recommend initially. Then you want to get the engine on this vehicle, even though it weighs 400 kilograms more. And then you want to get yourself the tracks. That is how I would upgrade this vehicle. Okay, so let's take a look at it, what it looks like now that it's upgraded. Mother of goodness! It kind of looks a bit like a Tiger P for some reason to me now, with the shape of that turret. Wow, what a bizarre tank. Has space protection all the way around it. I wonder how thick that spaced armor is. So it's actually 5mm. Okay, nothing too impressive there, but still will help against high explosive rounds and the occasional heat round. Okay, so when this thing is fully upgraded, what does it look like? Well, its damage per minute isn't special. I guess its alpha damage is okay. The penetration is okay for a tier 7 tank. Nothing too special within that regard. The gun handling's okay. The 10 degrees of gun depression is nice. The vehicle's pretty fast, and it has what looks like fairly okay armor. Like 200 at the front, it doesn't strike me as being as good as a T29. Its hull doesn't even really look as good as a T29, but maybe when you're using your gun depression, it does start to get good. Wow, when you are, it does become a full ricochet, and the turret now will be able to bounce all tier 5 and tier 6 tanks, but as soon as you start to have decent tier 7s, 8s, or 9s, yeah, the turret is going to feel pretty awful. So all in all, a pretty generic kind of tier 7 tank. The side scraping as well will be horrendous on this vehicle, and you still have the overmatch problem with all 46mm caliber guns. Okay, I think this vehicle is going to be much worse than the predecessor. I think the Juno looks really good. I don't think the Juto looks very good at tier 7. I think you'd be crazy to want to play this thing when you could play a T29 with the awesome turret and just use the 90mm caliber gun, and then you'll absolutely dominate a vehicle like this. Okay, so far so mediocre, I think, for the Japanese tank line. But here we go. We're going to be jumping up and taking a look at the Type 57. This is where things start to get serious because, of course, this is a tier 8 vehicle, and boy, that thing looks different. What the hell is this? Look at the angled side armor. What is this? Is it like an Object 257 with regards to how the armor works out? The tank looks so modern compared to what I was expecting it was going to be. But how will this armor work all towards the side of the vehicle? Well, before we take a look at that, let's read a little bit about the Type 57. So, a heavy tank project of the late 1950s, American technology and select intel on Soviet armored vehicles had a significant influence on its development. In contrast to American vehicles that used cast parts, the hull of the Japanese heavy tank was welded and had well-angled armor. At the same time, there were plans to use the cast turret with a developed rear recess. American experience was also drawn upon for the development of the guns, but the project was never built. Wow, and that's the stock turret on this thing? Okay, so we're playing radio roulette. Once again, I would recommend to use the stock radio on this vehicle because it weighs half a ton less than the upgraded radio. Okay, can we put the turret on this vehicle without having to take the tracks? Yes, we can. Can we put the upgraded gun on? Yes, we can. Can we manage to get the engine even though it's heavier? Yes, we can. Or super easy upgrade parts on this vehicle. Okay, how bad is this tank going to feel stock? Okay, it actually has the double aiming system even on the stock gun. This doesn't look like the best of guns to use. That DPM is horrible. The penetration's horrible as well. This does look like it's going to be a very bad tank stock. However, what is the vehicle going to look like when it's upgraded? Well, the turret has changed a bit. It does look like it has a tiny weak point on it. Let's take a look at the vehicle's armor inside the armor model. Okay. Whoa, okay, so the lower plate is pretty trash. Not bad against tier 6 and tier 7s. The upper hull looks pretty good. And whoa, it's got 12 degrees of gun depression? And it's not using a hydropneumatic suspension. Amazing. Whoa, this thing is what is this? What is this tank, boys and girls? Holy moly, if you're using your 12 degrees of gun depression, it does have a little bit of an issue here, but that is 300mm of effective armor, and the mantlet is good as well. I mean, if they load gold, then the mantlet will start to become a little bit of an issue against higher tier tanks. What is this thing? Oh my word, a tier 8 tech tree tank to actually get excited about? Now, of course, that lower plate becomes horrible, but look at the sides. The sides as well, apart from being overmatched by all 61mm caliber guns, the whole way that the upper hull works is bizarre with this vehicle. What a freaky armor layout. You're going to have to really have some experience to figure out how to deal with this thing. Now, it's got like this indent in the top to allow it to have 12 degrees of gun depression. That is not going to be overmatchable apart from 150mm caliber guns. And when you're using your gun depression, the weak point on top of this tank, which is actually fairly robust, it's not going to get penetrated by high explosive rounds, is decent. Now, you've got to be careful if you do catch the side of this when you're shooting at it. Man, what is this thing going to be like if it tries to side scrape, though? So if it tries to side scrape, the whole of the lower hull will be bad, but the upper hull will be an auto ricochet? This thing is bonkers. What a bizarre tank. Man, I'm really excited to play this one. I think it'll be very good if it has gun performance. Okay, well, interestingly enough, its damage per minute is not great, but not bad for a tier 8, and it does have 360 alpha damage, way better than the stock gun on this vehicle. So, if you want to use this vehicle's full rate of fire and not use the double aiming mechanic, you are going to have 0.42 accuracy, which is not great. And you're actually going to have to aim for 16 seconds before you get that fabulous 0.28 base accuracy, which will make this one of the most accurate tanks, heavy tanks in the game. And one of the most accurate tanks all in the game. Man, this thing looks like an absolute beast. Hit points, enough view range, especially when you get the final field mod so you can get the extra 3% view range on top. This thing looks like it might be one of the best tier 8 tech tree heavy tanks in the game. Boy, am I excited about actually playing this one, I haven't really said that for a tier 8 tank in the longest of times. My word, look how this thing can side scrape as well, with the fact that the lower part of the hull is angled as well, which means that you can actually over angle the side and get away with it. This thing looks like a beast. I would definitely recommend starting the tech tree here and not skipping up to tier 9 or tier 10 for all of you hardcore players out there. Okay, boy, that thing looks very exciting indeed. So now let's jump up to tier 9. It's going to cost you 156,900 experience. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what this thing is going to be like after taking a look at the tier 8. Okay, it looks a little bit more normal. Type 68. Okay, that turret definitely looks different to a lot of vehicles. Kind of looks a little bit more Polish for me. But the hull has now just become completely normal compared to the absolute madness that was the Type 57. I think this would be the tier 10 tank, right? Not the Type 68. Okay, so let's take a look at how bad this thing will be stock. Okay, 360 alpha, whatever. Okay, pen. Yeah, this is playable. You will be able to play this thing stock. It doesn't look great, but it looks like it's playable. Okay, so this tank's actually got the option of having another gun that you could be able to grind towards. That seems weird. It's going to cost you 42,000 experience to get this gun. And it doesn't really... I mean, it definitely is better than the stock gun, but I would not recommend going for that. Why not just spend the 42,000 experience to go for what I expect is going to be the real gun? Now that's weird. Even though it says it's got the double aiming system, Wargaming hasn't actually put 2 accuracies for this vehicle yet. So does that mean that the top gun on this vehicle doesn't have double aiming? Well, it looks like it does, and that it's actually just the garage that's showing a bit of an issue, because Tanks GG is showing that it has 0.42 before the cooldown and 0.28 after the cooldown. So a little bit of a mistake here by Wargaming. Okay, what would be my recommended upgrade path? Well, firstly, you get the turret. Then you want to be able to get yourself the gun. Hopefully we can put the gun on without having the tracks. Yes, we can. What about the radios on this vehicle? It uses the same radio as a Type 68. Again, I really wouldn't recommend putting on the extra 80 kilograms only to get 30 meters extra signal range here. This engine weighs 2 tons. These Japanese engines are very heavy indeed, but it does give it an extra 100 horsepower, so would recommend taking that. And then I'd go for the tracks afterwards. Okay, so once we've got this thing fully upgraded, how good of a tank does it look? Well, pretty good damage per minute, pretty good alpha damage. This is exactly the same as the M103, for example. Fantastic accuracy if you do manage to fully cool down the gun. Pretty good gun handling, so you won't need to have vertical stabilizers. And oh boy, 12 degrees of gun depression, but kind of annoyingly, the previous tank got 12 degrees of gun depression without using the hydropneumatic suspension, whereas this vehicle is going to have to use 8 degrees naturally and 4 degrees of the hydropneumatic suspension to be able to get that full 12 degrees of gun depression. Okay, hit points, very good, 1,950, 390 meters view range, means it'll be able to spot for itself once you get all the field mods especially. So let's take a look at this thing's armor. Wow, another absolute chonker of a turret, but again, a weak point on top. Okay, if we're using our 8 degrees of gun depression, is that weak point visible? Not really. That is a challenging shot to hit. That is a beefy turret, boys and girls. What happens if people load gold, like 300 millimeters of gold pen against it? That is a god tier turret. More hull down monsters coming to World of Tanks. Okay, the upper hull on this vehicle, again, that looks a lot like the STB-1's hull, doesn't it? In fact, is that the STB-1's hull? I don't think we talked about this vehicle. So in the late 1950s, the FV-4201 began to take shape, the first tank to be called a main battle tank. The future Chieftain was supposed to combine the characteristics of heavy and a medium tank. The US and German had a similar joint program, the MBT-70. It was the latter that drew the attention of Japanese designers who were in close contact with the American side. What interested them most about the project was the hydropneumatic suspension, as their local theatres of operation made it a very desirable addition. The tank was supposed to combine a low profile with a powerful gun and good armor. However, the Japan's self-defense Forces Command prioritized tanks with an average weight of 35 to 40 tons, and the vehicle turned out to be too expensive and no prototypes were built. So I guess not entirely influenced by the STB-1, but its hull armor definitely looks like it has a very similar effect, even with the viewports here on the side, which will be a weak point when the vehicle is hull down. Okay, so interestingly enough, if you are using the full gun depression hydropneumatic suspension, that upper hull does become good, but this thing is only going to want to expose the turret. And we can see that all of these Japanese tanks are going to have this huge weakness of this underflap armor here. Only 20 millimeters, that means that all 61 millimeter caliber guns will be overmatching that vehicle in that position. So let's take a look to see what this vehicle will be like when it's side scraping. Its side is flat, unlike the previous vehicle. It will be able to side scrape pretty well. And boy, these tanks look really good. They look very meta. It kind of looks a lot like an M103, just no weak point on top. Well, at least on top in the center, but one slanted over towards the left. That will actually make this vehicle very good for side scraping around corners like this if it wasn't for that awful driver's hatch. So, does this tank look like it's going to revolutionize the way that World of Tanks is played at Tier 9? No, I don't think it will. However, does this look like it's going to be quite a fun vehicle to play with 12 degrees of gun depression? Yes, yeah, I think it will. I think it'll be a solid vehicle at Tier 9. So, ladies and gents, boys and girls, this is where it gets exciting. After 222,000 experience, you can get yourself the new top of the tree, the Type 71. So let's take a look at this thing while it's stock inside the garage, and it has no upgraded modules, so this is going to be as good as it gets. Boy, this thing looks a lot like an STB-1 turret, but has kind of like a super hull. That does look just like a really chunky STB-1. Is that what this tank is? Are we looking at the STB-1 that just ate all of the onigiri here? Maybe. So battle tank project of the late 1960s. The vehicle was planned to be a scaled up counterpart of the STB-1. Yeah, as I expected. It was developed with a hydropneumatic suspension in mind that it would allow to change ground clearance and increase the gun's elevation and depression angles. This was especially important in urban environments. The tank was also supposed to receive improved armor and a large caliber gun. All right, well, let's go and take a look to see just how large of a caliber gun wargaming are putting on this. Okay, well, 120, so okay, a bit like a T125 within that regard. Very decent damage per minute. Not incredible, but not terrible. The vehicle's got standards, normal pen of 260. 320 APCR, that's not bad at all. You'll be able to make that work. And I'd say 320 APCR is comparable to 330 heat as long as you're not firing at completely flat surfaces. So it has amazing accuracy of 0.28, but this is only if you've managed to reload for 12 seconds. But if you want to use the vehicle's 8.8 second reload, you're going to have to deal with 0.42 accuracy. But again, use that for when you're firing in close quarters combat. And if you want to engage small weak points on the enemy team, or you want to be able to engage at longer distances for short shots, and you can be able to automatically wait that extra time to be able to gain that accuracy. So the gun handling seems pretty good. Wouldn't recommend vertical stabilizers on this vehicle as a necessity. Okay, the tank has, is that 13 degrees of gun depression? Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, this is the new gun depression king of the heavy tanks. Amazing. The vehicle's pretty fast forwards with a very good power to weight ratio, which means that this thing will scale very well with an experimental turbo because you won't need the power to weight increase from the regular turbo. The vehicle's armor looks good. Hit points looks good. 400 meters view range. This thing kind of looks like it could be just the new hull down daddy, but it all comes down to this, the armor reveal. Okay, so yeah, that is a chunky turret. Oh my word, hull down beast, but a pretty annoying kind of cupola to deal with. So if unless you're above the vehicle, there's this auto ricochet in the middle of it that is going to be so irritating. You just want to shoot into the center of it and hope that it either deviates to the top or to the bottom. I guess you could fire heat. That will be a significant advantage against this auto ricochet plate in the center. Okay, so what does the vehicle look like when it's using its 7 degrees of gun depression? So the top weak point is still slightly exposed, but that is going to be a challenge to hit. What happens if you load gold against this tank? It doesn't really make a difference. This thing is going to be a hull down monster. However, the hull armor sucks. There's no other way to say it. The hull armor sucks. And so I guess unless the vehicle is also angling its hull as well. No, even if you're angling the hull armor sucks on this tank. So does this mean that this is going to be a vehicle that just goes over a ridgeline and tries to bait you into shooting its turret, and then it overexposes its weak hull to be able to come after you? Oh, that's a little irritating. I mean, it's going to work against some tier 8s, but if only that hull armor was angled by just a little bit more, then it would actually be good. but it's going to be horrible within that regard. So yeah, this tank looks like it's going to be the new amazing hold down 13 degrees of gun depression tank. We'll be able to use more different positions. However, that hull is atrocious. And also you're going to be able to shoot up into these flaps with only 61mm caliber guns. And also the side armor on here, it's nice when you're using your gun depression, but I expect when you're not, it's actually pretty thick. But I think that means that when you're going to side scrape on this vehicle, it definitely will become a bit of a weak point. Interestingly enough, this vehicle does have a second lower hull, so to say, which is angled in, which is really annoying to play against because a lot of people will try and shoot the tracks and won't be able to penetrate the hull after they go through the tracks because it will count as an auto ricochet afterwards. The one thing that's really weird about this tank is that lower plate is a great bait, mate. Imagine people aiming down at that lower plate from an angle. You're going to be able to trap so many noobs into shooting that, whereas nobody really thinks about shooting the upper hull. So when you see these things on the battlefield in January, shoot that upper hull. Don't get baited into the lower plate, a little like the AMX M454 within that regard. But all in all, this thing looks pretty darn decent. So, wow. Incredible accuracy, if you can wait. Great damage per minute. Awesome. 13 degrees of gun depression will be best at tier 10, better than the Kranvang, comparable to the UDES and the STB1, but this thing definitely has a better turret than those tanks, I would feel. Now, is this thing going to absolutely revolutionize World of Tanks? I don't think so. I don't think it does anything super special with the alpha damage. Everything else is pretty good about the vehicle, but I think that awful upper hull, when people learn about it, it'll be just too much of a weak point to be able to hide. And I think that the 7 degrees of gun depression with the hydropneumatic suspension, you probably find that this tank feels a little bit clunky. So, all in all, the new Japanese heavy tanks, they don't look like they're going to revolutionize the game, but they do look like they're going to do pretty much everything just as well as some of the hold-down monsters. And when you add to the fact that they have the new double aiming mechanic, which will allow them to be incredible snipers on said ridgeline, then that means that these are going to be competitive tanks. Are they going to break the matchmaker? I don't think so. I don't think they're going to break the matchmaker. Is it going to be another really annoying class of hold-down tanks that are really hard to penetrate the turrets? Yeah, it definitely looks like it will be. And make sure you subscribe and stay tuned to the channel, as I will be giving you my full tank preview of the Type 71 very soon. So, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was my first look at the new Japanese heavy tanks. Really hope this video was useful for you with the upgrade paths, let you know maybe where you want to start in the tech tree. Personally, for me, I think you've got to start with the Juno. Maybe skip the Juto, but definitely play the Type 57. And I think the Type 68 and Type 71, well, obviously you're going to play the Type 71, right? The Type 68 looks playable. Really hope it helped you out. If it did, give the video a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And if you're watching this video as it's released on Friday, I'm going to be going live all day on twitch.tv/QuickyBaby, testing out some of the new Japanese tanks on the test server. But also, I've got brand new drops today to celebrate the release of Pattern the Tank. So you can come and get yourself a Pattern skin, 5 premium consumables, and 5 200% extra crew training and free experience boosters. So, really looking forward to seeing you all live right now. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.